Good morning and happy day. This is Ven, and I welcome you to the M.O.C Spotlight, where we take apart what you build, and then put it back together, only to take it apart again, and then put it back together, and then take it apart again. And that, my friends, is the story of all LEGO sets. But anyway, for today's episode, we will be looking at Ekorak, Predorai Knight, created by Ekorak, and posted on our message boards. And just in case you haven't paid attention to any of the previous episodes, let me tell you about my method of reviewing, which will involve a point system that is based on 3 fundamental attributes: the overall appearance of the M.O.C, the build of the M.O.C itself, and the concept and ideas behind the M.O.C's creation. Each quality will amount up to 5 points each, adding up to a final score that will be evaluated at the end of the episode. Now let's move on to the opinions and crap. Now first off, this M.O.C looks very neat, has a very animated vibe coming off of it. See, you could even see it like dripping down right there. Anyway, there are 3 aspects of this M.O.C that really stuck out to me the most. The first being that chest design. Now, Ekorak himself admitted that that chest design is not his own idea, and that he in fact borrowed it from Shadow Gear 633 and 5, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with. But even though this isn't his idea, it still looks pretty good, and it works with the rest of the M.O.C fairly well. Looks very fitting, and it doesn't look like it was just randomly tossed in there. The second thing I noticed was the design of the legs, the lower legs specifically, where we have this really cool looking aesthetic using Exoforce arms and claw pieces. I actually kind of like how that looks. And though the legs are like the most complicated looking portion of this M.O.C, as you can see the rest of this M.O.C is very simplistic, it doesn't seem to really disrupt the flow of the M.O.C's design. I actually think it adds on to the M.O.C's character, and one could even say that it complements the spiky aesthetic on the forearms. And now the third thing that stuck out to me about this M.O.C was the head design. It's essentially a Borak Va head with a little attachment on top of it, but I do appreciate that this is a unique decision to make for a self-moc to have this kind of head. Now there's actually another feature to this M.O.C that I didn't notice right away. This M.O.C actually sports what looks to be a Borak Va head just mutilated and transformed into a Needler from Halo. I actually mistaken this for like an alternate head or something until I realized that the M.O.C was holding it like a gun. But anyway, yeah, another cool feature.
Overall, I think this M.O.C is fairly solid. It's just that the neck appears a bit too thin, and the elbows, I think, are adjusted a bit too high. So there's a bit of odd proportioning here. Something tells me he's gonna have a hard time picking his nose. Also, the lower legs seem a bit too long, and they make the bending at the knees look a little awkward. And now with all that said, let's talk about the build. The simplistic appearance of this M.O.C is caused by this simplistic build. And I like the simplicity of this M.O.C. Simplicity is not a bad thing at all. Because this M.O.C's build is so simplistic, there isn't really all that much I can comment on aside from the legs, which have the most complexity out of the entire M.O.C. And when it comes to these lower legs, they look pretty fine. Minorly intricate, yet fairly sturdy looking. And now, there aren't really that many creative ideas. And that doesn't mean that the M.O.C doesn't look creative. As I mentioned earlier, it has a fairly unique appearance. But it's just that there isn't really a lot going on in the actual construction of this M.O.C. But I guess I should mention that could either be a good thing or a bad thing. It's honestly subjective depending on who you are. But for me personally, I like seeing a little bit of complexity when it comes to builds. I like seeing all these crazy ideas being executed in the builds of certain M.O.Cs. And that's why I have some praise for this guy's lower legs, because they keep the simplistic look, though it's pretty evident that the construction of them wasn't just like you snap on a shell to a bone. And so again, it is subjective, and it's not so much a con as it is an acknowledgement. And I hope that made sense, because if it didn't, then well, I'm screwed. Okay, maybe I should just rephrase it. Sometimes, kids, simplicity could be cool, but sometimes it could also be bland. Heck, I think I'm already segueing into concepts now, so let's just keep talking about concepts. So of course, the big idea of the creation of this MOC is that it's a self-moc. It's a representation of the person that built it. And it looks like he wanted to give himself a fairly simplistic yet unique design all around. And by which I mean that there isn't a lot going on in this MOC, but it's still, well, you know, unique. And I feel like I'm repeating myself all over this episode. But anyway, I like that. I like that he strived for simplicity in his MOC. That actually kind of reminds me of the droid MOCs that we went over a couple of episodes back. It's like he wanted to execute his idea without going all crazy and all over the place in his MOC. He had some simple ideas in mind and he executed them very well. This black and white Borak headed being that wields a needler type of weapon, which I think turned out pretty cool. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be a needler from Halo. Whatever it is, it turned out pretty cool. And when it comes to concepts, that's really all that matters, is that your ideas were executed how you want them to be. And by the looks of this MOC, I would say that went pretty well. So there really isn't all that much else I wish to comment on when it comes to this MOC, and without further ado, I wish to move on to the scores. And so for the MOC's appearance, I'll give it a 4 out of 5. It's nice and simple, unique looking, but the proportions on the arms and legs are a little odd. When it comes to the build, I dictate a 3.5 out of 5. It's an okay build. I just would have liked more interesting ideas to have come into fruition. And finally, the concept of the MOC, I'll give it a 4.5 out of 5. It's hard to give a self-moc a very low score because this is really, as I said earlier, a representation of the builder himself. You know, the big idea is that this is what he wants to look like. And it turned out looking pretty good. So that's why I'm giving him a lot of brownie points. The only reason why it isn't perfect is mainly because of my complaint with the build. But all around, it has an interesting appearance, it has some pretty cool features. It's an all-around fairly solid MOC. And so now for the final score, if you did your basic math, you will have gotten a 12 out of 15. It's a pretty decent score for a simple self-moc. And it goes to show that simple MOCs are not a bad thing. Simplicity doesn't necessarily mean it's bland or boring, because that's definitely not how I look at this MOC. It's interesting, it's solid, and I think Ekorak did a pretty good job with it. And for future reference, I will be going over more MOCs similar to this, because though the most of my reviews to date have involved big or complex looking MOCs, sometimes I actually like a little simplicity. So thank you all for watching. Be sure to rate, comment, subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments below. If you have a MOC that you would like to be featured in the MOC Spotlight, post it on our message boards. I check that on a regular basis, and it's very likely that I might find it if you post it there. And I'll see you all next time.